Welcome to another episode of Medicinal Moves. I am incredibly fortunate and lucky to have the guest that's joined us today. I've got Mr. Brandon Bird, a veteran trainer who specializes in many things. But for today's conversation, we're really going to hyper focus a little bit on recovery and mobility. Brandon, how did you get started in this health and fitness world?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. My fitness journey actually began well before I even knew it was. When I was very young, at the age of 5 years old, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Over the next 5 years, had surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation. Kind of went through my childhood, not really knowing where I was supposed to fit in or what I was supposed to do. It wasn't until my 20s that I realized, hey, I've been blessed with my health, right? Although, I still have a coordination disorder to this day, I have the ability to be healthy. Not a lot of people are blessed with that. So, hey, if
Right.
I've been given that gift, I should use it to help others.
Wow. That's a heck of a start to life. To overcome that before you're even in fifth grade. Oh my
Yep.
gosh. That's very impressive. So with a journey like that, you have a clear appreciation for health. What do you think your greatest blessing is as far as your health goes today?
Yeah, I have, I don't know, I feel like an inherent understanding of just how things work, how things move together. And it's been interesting, a journey as a strength athlete. And now as a movement and recovery specialist. It's like, hey, a lot of the stuff that I went through, right? A lot of the headaches, a lot of the injuries, the bumps, the bruises, I can hopefully, through people like you having me on through social media, and even having people here in our shop in Nashville, Tennessee, I can hopefully help other people avoid issues or overcome those issues quicker than I did.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think you would be the first person that I'd want to call. With that, I mean, let's talk about recovery and mobility. Um,
Sure,
I I would love to hear what is recovery from somebody that's created their own miracle.
sure, sure. So recovery is really the concept that you're uh, the let me first define recovery. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Recovery is the process by which we prepare for our next period of physical exertion, right? A lot of people are like, hey, what do you mean? I just got done, right? Why
Mhm.
am I thinking about recovery? But if you've been at this long enough, for example, I bench press tonight. I got a squat tomorrow. Bench is heavy, squat's a little bit lighter right now. So the whole time I'm training, I'm thinking of, okay, what do I need to do between now and my next training session, right, to optimize my performance at a super competitive level, right? The pros, whether you're a baseball fan, a basketball fan, right? You see those guys performing well on a regular basis. Now they have professionals helping them recover, access to facilities that you and I will probably only ever dream of. It'd be nice to check them out at some point, right?
Right.
But yeah, so our recovery, proper recovery equals proper performance. If you're not recovering properly, you're never going to be able to perform at your best.
Absolutely. I think I'm up with you on recovery. It's what you do to prepare for the next, and obviously the importance of that is performance. It's
Yep.
preparation to perform. It's kind of like insurance, huh?
Absolutely, absolutely, and having my father's in the insurance industry, so I can completely understand that analogy. So I grew up around that. Also, owns his own business, so I can completely recommend and support that. But yeah, from a physical standpoint, we can't be depleting ourselves on a regular basis and expecting more, right? A couple of topics that we're going to hit on later on, right? Fat loss, stuff like that. Hey, if you're not recovering properly, if you're not giving your body everything it needs to enter those phases, right? The fat burning phases, we're unfortunately gonna cut ourselves short. And
Right.
there's a multitude of processes that we can go into in individual or group detail, depending on what you would like to get into.
Yeah, before we get into the types of recovery, I guess I want to understand muscle repair, injury prevention, and then how we get to either performance enhancement or continuation. Could you share those recovery benefits as far as muscle repair and injury prevention?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm actually going to do that via way of explaining the framework
Okay.
that I follow. So the corrective exercise framework is
Mm,
one that inherently people know, but maybe not the specifics. So the corrective exercise framework is a mandatory 3 phases with an optional 4th phase. So the first phase is inhibition, right? Getting on a
mm.
foam roller, getting on a lacrosse ball, right? Really working out any of those issues. What that's going to allow things to do is it's going to allow blood flow, right, to then enter the muscle. A lot of adhesions, as we call them from a technical perspective, are inhibiting blood flow. Blood equals fuel, equals recovery, right? So
Mhm.
we really need that blood flow. The second phase is then lengthening. So making sure we're nice and stretched out, right? Take those muscles, try to get them back into a more neutral state. The third phase is then activation, right? After we've worked out any issues, after we've stretched them, we need to reactivate so the muscle knows what it needs to do in its new state. And if we're able to achieve all 3 of those, bingo, we're ready for our next go.
I love that. Inhibition, extension, and activation.
Yep.
Very cool. And you said there was a 4th phase. It sounds like it's optional. Is this like the performance enhancement phase? Is this like the
Yeah.
super?
Yeah. So the 4th phase is integration. So integration means integrating it into a specific activity. If you're just going back to the gym, there's not a ton to integrate there, right? But let's say, coach, right, you're like, hey, you're in the middle of a football season, right? You injure your ACL, you go through all of this stuff, and then you come see me, right, to get you back on the field. So I'm going to work you through the first 3 phases, right? And then in that 4th phase, I'm going to work directly with your coaches. Say, hey, what do we need to do, right, to get whatever athlete or whomever back on the field, back on the court, back in the pool as quickly as possible.
Nice. So, what are the 2 types of recovery? I think that are there a
Yeah.
couple of different?
Yeah, we can look at recovery from a number of directions, but I think where you're trying to lead this is active versus passive recovery.
Yeah.
um So yeah, active recovery is just that. You are corrective exercise that I just mentioned. That is very much active recovery. Um, I don't like the term rest days, right?
Mm.
Because rests inherently means, hey, we're kicking it back, we're sipping a couple brews, watching the Masters, which is totally fine,
Sounds
right? But
awesome.
that oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But that isn't recovering. There's definitely a time and a place, right? Our bodies definitely need a break. If I were to break it down, I have a 4-day training split. I then do active recovery another 2 days, and I only actually have 1 day where I don't do anything.
Mm.
So if if we look, so I have 4 training days, 2 active recovery days, and 1 passive recovery day. Not to say that I'm not interested in recovery on that day. So active recovery, corrective exercise, some sort of gentle cardio, right? Some sort of movement that's going to aid in, like I said, blood is the ultimate recovery fuel. The more blood we can get flowing to those muscles, the better we're going to recover.
I got one more
Passive
question.
recovery also very, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Active rest day started to make a little bit of sense to me. Blood is fuel. So you do support or encourage active rest days, like those days where you work out, you're in the gym, but it's not like the other 4 training days, right?
Absolutely. And you kind of your body's going to be the best gauge, right? We want to go in, we want to push it to 110% every day.
Yeah.
But some days that just isn't in the cards, right? If our sleep schedule, diet, whatever, right? If any of those pieces aren't on point for that day or the period leading up to that training session, we might have to back off a little bit. So even, and that's kind of, another sort of concept, right? Calling it audible. But yes, so I am very much a proponent of active recovery, not to say that passive recovery is a bad thing. From a passive recovery standpoint, the 2 biggest proponents of passive recovery that I like are hot therapy and cold therapy. Actually, you probably can't see it, but just to my left, I actually have a red light therapy setup that I use as part of my business. We mentioned blood flow. These infrared lights are proven to increase blood flow. Just as red light therapy works in infrared sauna, same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But living in Nashville, Tennessee, it's 80 degrees today. I really don't want to get in a sauna. I'm already sweating as it is, so we don't need much more of that. It's a great day, though, for the other side of that, for cold therapy. So there we have 2 options. We have cryotherapy, definitely a big fan. What you'll find is you're going to get into some sort of cold temperature, usually between 125 and 150 negative, and that's in Fahrenheit. Apologies to anyone who uses Celsius. To just that. So what happens during this period is the blood all rushes to your internal organs, right, to protect, right, those vital pieces. You're in there for 2 to 3 minutes, and as soon as you get out, that blood rushes to all of the extremities. It's like a very quick, and the blood's nice and rejuvenated, right, because it's just working through that internal circulatory system, and boom, we release that, and it provides some nice fresh red blood cells. Same sort of yeah. I actually have some pictures of. I haven't done cryotherapy in a while, but last time I was in, it was between minus 154 to 156. And there's also cold tanks, right? Same sort of concept, right? Very different. Wet cold is versus dry cold. The cryotherapy is very, very dry cold. You still have to keep your extremities, your hands, your feet, other sensitive areas covered. Whereas actually during, if you've ever been in a cold tank, that's actually not as necessary. Cold tanks usually somewhere 40 to 45 degrees is a more, it's still just as cold, can be just as painful, but great for recovery.
My mind's blown by a negative 150. I didn't know we could go that low. That is incredible. So before we talk, let's talk about mobility. I think that you kind of addressed those. Let's talk about the role of mobility. Could you define mobility for us?
Yeah, so mobility is, a lot of people like the term flexibility, right? Being flexible is all well and good. Mobility is the controlled version of flexibility. If I have to explain it to an average person, we have two ends of the same spectrum. We have stability and mobility. There are hypermobile individuals and there are hyperstable individuals. To avoid injury, and this totally depends on what you're doing, but to avoid injury, ideally we'd be somewhere in the middle, right? We'd have that perfect mix of mobility and stability. Unfortunately, I am on this side of things. I am a very hyper stable individual, man, which is it's great when it comes to powerlifting, great, but you ask me to drop into a super deep squat, without warming up, that absolutely will not occur. So it's been years of training and sort of trying to figure out mobility wise what I need to do, right? And if we think about what are the biggest areas that we would need mobility in, right? Hips, ankles, and those two are actually very highly related. And I think your shoulders are probably the three biggest problem areas I see in people, but especially the hips and the shoulder girdle. So try to focus on that from it depends on the day in the gym, but today being bench press day, hey, let's make sure this is nice and open, right? Tomorrow's squat day and my hips are screaming at me as we speak. I don't know why, but it's just what they like to do. Could have something to do with the fact that I spent 12 hours in a vehicle this weekend. So who knows?
I definitely think that those two might be related. What about the importance of mobility? Mobility and the stability. I like how you kind of threw those out there. I like that much better than stiff. Mobility is something that allows us to recover quicker, I'm assuming, because of what we talked about previously, how you kind of painted the perspective with blood being that fuel. If your body is mobile, I would assume you would be able to transport the nutrients, and that recovery would lay a foundation to extend into that mobility, and they would work together.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to call you out with this next part, but each one of us has some sort of movement dysfunction. It happens. We're all there, right?
Yeah.
It's just to the extent, right, that it inhibits you from doing what you want to do. Some people are much more inhibited than others, right? But our body's made to work as one system, right? If part of us, if our hips, right, and our glutes are failing, our lower back's gonna hurt, right? If our ankles aren't working appropriately, we might be more prone to an ankle sprain. Or if you're into lifting, it's directly related. A lack of ankle mobility and a lack of hip mobility are directly correlated. A lack of ankle mobility is going to mean your hips and your low back have to work that much harder. So yes, achieving that level of wellness, right? Holistic wellness, focusing on that. When your body's working better as a system, right? It's going to be happier and it's going to be healthier.
What's your favorite mobility exercise?
That's a great question. There's an upper body complex. So I have a YouTube channel that I actually haven't posted on in a few months, but it's a banded upper body complex to basically get the shoulder girdle nice and opened up. So what ends up happening, right, through periods of sitting, and I'll turn to the side to kind of demonstrate this. So most of us end up kind of doing this, right, throughout the day. So these muscles back here get super stretched out. These muscles get super tight, right? And it ends up, that's why you see a lot of people walking around like this, and it's got to be painful. I unfortunately see too many people. What this banded complex does is it helps warm up everything. It helps stretch out the shoulders and the pecs. I love doing it, on a bench press day, but it's kind of, if you ever kind of felt like there's a weight on your chest, right? It's that movement. It's 3 movements, right? But you can breathe, and you feel so much bigger and more powerful, and not so, like the hunchback after the end of that sequence.
I have spondylosis, so I definitely can relate to that. It's when we talk about limitations. So yeah, absolutely. Uh,
Absolutely.
Face shoulder stretch. I'll have to check out your channel and try to get that. Um, well, let's talk a little bit more about the science of fat and recovery. I would love to hear kind of how these two can play together, or at least explain the role of body fat in the energy storage and overall health, because I'm sure those extra pounds have effects not only on mobility but also our ability to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were kind of chatting about earlier, right, is for each pound that you lose, 4 pounds of pressure get released on your joints, right? So if you
Mm,
lose 5 pounds, man, 20 pounds of pressure, and it doesn't 5 pounds doesn't seem like that much. In the past couple of years, I'm down probably close to 15 pounds. Do I feel better? Maybe, man. I'm getting older. We're all experiencing stuff.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's super important, because as your body continues, as you continue to put on weight, and different people accumulate weight in different ways, right? But it's going
mhm,
to result, as we talked about, the movement dysfunctions. As you accumulate additional mass, you're going to have one area or another, whether it's in your hips, whether it's your belly, right, kind of pulling things forward. It's going to exacerbate any movement issues that you have, and potentially make any others that much worse. So we definitely want to try to keep weight within a healthy range. That said, I'm not a proponent of walking around at 4 to 6% body fat. That
right.
doesn't provide adequate cushion for the joints. Doesn't allow, some of the greatest fat stores are around our organs. And our organs need that fat to survive.
Absolutely.
That said, from a visceral fat standpoint, we can probably get rid of most of that, and it's good to do. That said, especially if you're a strength athlete or hitting the gym on any sort of a regular basis, body fat does provide cushion for the joints. So maintaining some sort of body fat there, or if you don't feel like you have enough body fat, supplementing with stuff like fish oils, glucosamine, some other well-known supplements. But hey, the supplements are made to do just that, supplement what we're doing, right? It all starts at the base, our sleep, our diet, got to have those locked in, right? We can't run an entire wellness program on supplementation.
Absolutely. So you would say that fat actually plays a positive role in recovery?
It does. It does. So I suppose first and foremost is protein. So I aim for a gram per pound of body weight. That has worked for me. I've gone higher. I've gone lower, but that's about, and right now I'm about 153 pounds. So shoot for 145 to 150 pounds on training days.
Yeah,
Non-training days, I'll drop it down a little bit, maybe a protein shake worth, but not enough to make a huge difference. So I suppose that's protein, right? Is the fuel that our muscles, pardon me, need to recover. Um, but from a general recovery standpoint, from just um, how our body works, so we need fuel first and foremost to recover.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
if we're in a caloric deficit, it's going to take that much longer and be that much more difficult for us to recover. So the way I go about it, my mantra is around nutrition is fairly simple. It's food is fuel. Some nights, it's like, I've worked hard. It's been a long week. I just need to crush a pizza. I'm not super proud to admit that, but sometimes it's what's got to happen, man.
That sounds like reality. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. We live. We're humans. We're meant to enjoy, right, food, enjoy life, and there's a way to do that from a healthy perspective. I think the 80-20 rule is a great way to go about it, right? So food is fuel. So our goal, first and foremost, is to make sure that we're fueled for our training sessions, right? Whatever that activity is, right? And then on 2 out of my 3 recovery days during the week, I do intermittent fasting.
Yes.
I don't need
Big
as much
fan.
fuel on. Exactly. I don't need as much fuel on those days, so it's easier to fit things into a smaller window. So yeah, from a caloric standpoint, I think it's important to, make sure that we're first fueled, but then outside of that, if we're not in the gym, what do we need to do to, I guess, achieve our goals at that point, right? So, and we can talk about any and all of the other 2 macros, as I already hit on protein. That said, the bigger of a caloric deficit that we're in, the lower our calories, the higher our protein requirements are going to be, to make sure that we're optimizing our recovery from that standpoint. So, if you're looking to, lose weight at that point, right? High protein, moderate fat, low carbs. If you're not into that and you're just looking to fuel, muscle glycogen is the best way to fuel active training. It's where your body's going to go first. So, I like, from that standpoint, fructose is great in my pre-workout protein shake. I have an apple. I have some oats, which are obviously longer term carbohydrate release. But if I'm in the gym for an hour and a half to 2 hours, I need that. And then a scoop of protein, right? It allows those amino acids to start getting in there. But the shake actually has more carbohydrates than it does protein.
Sure.
But I'm not looking. Go ahead.
No. I just said you need them. The carbohydrates.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's if your goal isn't, today I'm at a 95% of my max bench press. So at that point, I need the fuel, right, to make sure that I can continue to train heavy. If your training isn't heavy or if it's not super intense, you might not need all of those carbohydrates. So the fuel, right, the fuel requirements totally depend on what you're doing. But you want to make sure that your body's fueled for that first. Because one of the most awesome statistics, I'm not sure if you're familiar with EPOC. EPOC stands for energy post oxygen
consumption.
Consumption, absolutely. That period can be up to 48 hours after intense weightlifting training. So, hey, if we get in, if we push it super hard and we're watching what we're doing, right, making sure our protein's high, we're meeting our energy requirement, our body's going to keep, needing those calories. So as long as we're plugging in good fuel, it's going to use it for positive results. Heal the muscle, build the muscle, not store a bunch of, extra junk that we don't need.
Absolutely. That's kind of what I was getting towards. Was we talked about fat storage and then fat burning. Exactly that. So essentially, if I'm hearing you correctly, I can keep my EPOC, maybe my BMR high and engaged, consuming carbohydrates. Because
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it sounds like you incorporate intermittent fasting to keep those numbers moving forward, to get the momentum that you need to always have these systems working. So that system sounds highly beneficial to me. Absolutely.
Yeah, intermittent fasting is actually great from a couple different standpoints. It's good. I've had digestive issues, I really think, since I was sick. I don't know why that is, but lactose issues, a bunch of these other issues. So intermittent fasting is great for a digestive reset. The longer that fast is, if you can go 20 hours plus, the greater that reset's going to be. It's also great for reducing inflammation, right? As we talk about recovery. So, hey, you've fueled things, but you don't necessarily need the calories the next day. It's going to help with those inflammation levels.
Have you ever heard of the fourth macronutrient?
I believe I have, but for some reason I'm drawing a blank.
Well,
Refresh my
some people
memory.
say it's fiber, and then a lot of people say it's ketones as the fourth
Okay.
macronutrient. Um, and it's exactly what you're laying out pretty much. When you have those ketones for recovery, everything just falls into place. Everything kind of checks out as far as energy sources, because recovery, in order to really recover, you need to touch all those bases, and listening to your program, you're hitting all four. That's why it sounds like awesome. Sounds so good.
Absolutely. And if you're just plugging in protein and no pun intended, but you're just plugging in protein, and you're gonna very quickly get plugged up. So you need that
Mhm.
fiber, you need that fourth, nutrient to keep the system moving. Your body doesn't like a ton of protein, but to achieve the results that I know everybody listening wants to achieve, you're gonna need ample of both of those sources.
So let's talk briefly about tips that you might have for anybody listening, that may enhance recovery and mobility, because you're definitely saying the fourth macro is one. If it's not the fourth macro of ketones, it's the fourth macro of fiber. That balanced diet with healthy fats are going to make sure that you can recover and you can train and you can have mobility. So, what would be the best tip or tips that you would have that could enhance recovery and mobility?
Sure, sure. So I think I like an 80-20 rule from many, actually three different perspectives. So the first we already kind of mentioned, right, is diet. The second has to do with the principle of what you're doing in the gym versus out of the gym. Uh, I've heard it said, it's not my principle, but 80% of what you truly achieve is accomplished outside of the gym. Um, and so focusing on those areas of your sleep, of your nutrition. I think sleep is probably the biggest. Hey, if we're getting ideally 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, some people need more than that, some people need less than that, but that's
Yeah.
that's a general sort of rule. Sleep is first and foremost, thin nutrition, and then we start to focus on the mobility side of things. So really, it's hard, right? With when you consider, right, a program, right? Hey,
Mhm.
people are like, hey, I'm in the gym, 4 days a week. I have my program. I'm like, okay, what does your mobility program look like? And they just kind of look at you, kind of weird. It's like, but you truly need that program, right? And sometimes that mobility will be as simple as warming up for that training session, right? If you spend 15 to 20 minutes, some days you might need longer than that. And depending on how your body feels, that might be incorporating some extra work, right? The worst thing you could do is, pardon me, avoid that recovery, and then
Mm.
be you're more injury prone at that point.
You're gonna
And
fail to perform, like you said. Hmm.
if you put in that extra 5%, that extra 15 minutes a day to avoid an injury, cool statistic, 30 to 40 not cool from a, hey, I don't like this, but to put it in
Yeah.
perspective, 30 to 40 people are going to experience some sort of injury in the gym.
Mm.
As much as half of those, they say between 10 to 15% of all people, right? So about half of those getting injured are never going to return, right? So if we
Wow.
can take steps to prevent that injury in the first place, that's going to be beneficial. I'm actually in the process of working with a few gyms here in the local Nashville area that, hey, especially if you're active, it's like we all need the work done. So me included. I don't know
Yeah,
about
me
you,
too.
but
Me too. If me and my followers wanted to get a hold of a mobility program, do you have that available on your website? Can they find it via social media, your YouTube, anywhere?
yeah, absolutely. So on social media, I'm Big Bird Performance Systems, and that's Bird with a U, so Big Bird Performance Systems. On Instagram and Facebook, actually a third of the way through a mobility and recovery series on Instagram right now. So putting a lot of good ideas out there, trying to get people hooked in. What I'm going to do after this series is then record a lot of this in a long form content to my YouTube channel. Also, Big Bird Performance Systems. I have a few videos up there already, actually from 2024. So time to get back into recording some long form content.
Yeah.
And then if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I am a strength and conditioning coach. I'm a corrective exercise specialist and a sports nutrition coach. Design programs for people that work for you. They're designed around, functional strength, and what's functional to you or me or, Joe down the street, it's going to be completely different. So really working with people like, so that they don't get burnout and we're all able to achieve that level of harmony, right, through wellness.
Awesome. I want anybody that has their own tips or a need for tips to get engaged in the comments section. Share your ideas. Let's collaborate and definitely subscribe. I want you to subscribe and get with Brandon, and let's all get a little bit healthier. I just thank you, Brandon, for making the time. I thank everybody for coming in, tuning in, and listening. And I hope that we can get together hopefully soon and crush another topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on. We'll definitely look forward to it. And same for you. If you ever, have any questions, feel free to reach out. Anybody who's tuned in, please do the same. I'm an open book. So, have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience now. I'm just looking forward to sharing it.
I'm definitely going to be in your inbox. I have a lot of questions. You've got my curiosities going, and I'm thinking about a lot of new ideas. So I'm definitely going to take you up on that. And I just can't thank you enough. Guys, continue to support Medicinal Moves. Visit medicinalmoves.com, read our articles and information, and we will have Brandon's information on the blog as well. Until the next episode, peace.
Thanks, guys.